In Los Angeles, California, the LAPD has been a gigantic problem for a really long time. Why do I say that? Because their budget only continues to increase year after year, while their brutality gets worse and worse. If you follow me on social media and you've been following me for a long time, you know that I had to file an injunction against the LAPD for their use of force against journalists. And that also included their use of force against protesters. The First Amendment right is a right that we all have constitutionally. But if you were to ask the LAPD about that right, they would tell you, you have that right when we say you have the right. And if we choose that you don't, you don't. But there are a lot of people that are running in the primary election in California right now that want to hold the police accountable. You already saw my interview with Marissa Roy. If you haven't already, make sure that you go see it. She is running for city attorney. And today I have two more interviews with two candidates, progressive candidates at that, who are running to get re-elected in the primary. One is running for re-election and city council, and the other one as controller. Hey guys, a quick note before we begin today's episode. I am not personally endorsing any candidates in this series. The purpose of these episodes is to present to you each candidate's views, policies, and background so that you can make the most informed decision for you at the ballot box. Make sure to do your own research, form your own opinions, and use your critical thinking skills as you decide who to vote for this election season. Here's our conversation. Hey everyone, I'm really excited to have a special guest on today. Kenneth Mejia is here. Hi.
Everyone, hey Liana, thanks for having me.
Yes, I'm so glad that you're here. I was just kind of kidding around with Kenneth earlier that I've been trying to get him on for a year, and we finally made it happen. Kenneth has been doing some really incredible work when it comes to his role as controller. So for people who don't know who you are, tell us a little bit about your background and the position that you hold.
Yeah, so the city controller is the city's accountant and auditor. So think about the person who looks after the money, making sure that those funds are spent effectively and efficiently, and then also making sure you all just know where your money's going and not going. So your financial watchdog in a nutshell.
Yes. And a lot of the things that you do is audit and budgeting and seeing where it is that the city spends their money. And because of that really important work, you have also been attacked a fair number of times. So tell us a little bit about this campaign that you're doing currently and some of the, attacks, concerns that some people on the opposition have of you.
Yeah, sure. So my background is I'm a certified public accountant and auditor. I'm actually the city's first ever CPA and auditor to be the city's accountant and auditor. And since I've been in office, I've just been really making all the city's finances, the budget, the city's operations more easy to understand. I have a whole bunch of websites, data websites, dashboards, maps, so that way you can learn more about your city. And I think for us in office, not everyone likes that in here in City Hall, whether it's city council or the mayor, because my job is showing what everyone is doing because of a result of their decisions, all right, their votes. And I think for us, we are always constantly under attack. People want to take away our controller authorities, our power, or they want to give it to other people to do it too. But that was the reason why I was elected. I was elected to be independent, accountable to you all, not to the city council, not to the mayor. You voted for me to audit the police, homelessness, housing, everything, and that's what I'm doing. And that doesn't bode well, like I said, whether it's for in office or even our opposition. We're up against a lot of disingenuous, dishonest attacks. But for us, we have a very good support base, community of people who've known us for years, and they know who I am as a person and also what I've done in the past 3.5 years. So I'm very thankful for all of you all for sticking around.
Yeah. So, one of the things that is really fascinating about the work that you do is that you, because I am a nerd and I know a lot of other people are nerds, you will put out these like really amazing like charts of how the city is spending their money. And one of my favorite charts that you put out is the budget. So, there was a proposed budget that the mayor put out. I want to say it was back in April. You can correct me if I'm wrong on that. And $3.25 billion was going to go towards police. I find that to be fairly egregious because that is almost half of the city's budget would be going towards the police. Um, what are your thoughts on, that proposed budget and how efficient was the role that you had in holding city council and the mayor accountable to the people when it comes to spending taxpayer money?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the budget for next fiscal year, which begins on July 1st, for the police specifically, it's actually 3.6 billion. And then of that amount, 3.25 billion, I believe, or the amount that you mentioned is the discretionary amount, which they take up close to half of the city's discretionary funds, which could be spent on anything. And, for us, we always knew that, the council and the mayor, they are pro police heavy.
Yeah.
And that's just something like you sort of accept because I'm the controller. I can't change all these 15 council members' votes or anything, but at least I could just show where it goes. And what we did try to do during the budget process is get more money for other departments because we already knew, like I said, most of it's going to go to the police. But could we get more for the department that fixes your sidewalks, trims your trees, fills the potholes, resurfaces the roads? So that was like sort of what we were trying to do. And we saw some of that in this budget cycle. We also got a little bump in our accounting group too, but we didn't get, any auditors or fraud, waste, and abuse investigators, which is unfortunate. But I would say, for us, just providing sunlight on where the money is going or not going is honestly like the best tool, especially given how short-staffed my office is. If I'm able to give you all the information and the data, you all could then be like, our quasi, auditors and people questioning government. So that's how we've been able to hold government accountable is through the transparency work.
Yeah, and I think this is really important to a lot of people that live here, especially if they are really active in a lot of what's been going on in the city. I covered when the Trump administration sent over the National Guard, the LAPD's response, and how much money was spent on having police on the ground, brutalizing protesters, breaking journalists' First Amendment rights and press rights. And one of the things that I noticed from the work that you had been doing was kind of exposing how much money was actually spent around that time. And like you said, a lot of people really want to see the city investing in things that are actually going to benefit the people, not brutalizing protesters and shooting press with rubber bullets on live television. So what was it like to kind of investigate that situation? And what would you like to see moving forward when it comes to LAPD's response? Because the city had to pay overtime for that.
Yeah, and I appreciate you all for the work that you do being out there on the ground. Yeah, we found out that nearly $30 million was spent in like 2.5 weeks
Yes.
on police overtime when ICE started raiding Los Angeles. And when we were going about it, we were like, well, this is under our purview. This is city tax dollars. So let's find out how much it costs. We reached out to the LAPD. We ran some reports ourselves to fact check some things. And, we thought it was very important to put out because we were also suffering, like a budget deficit too.
Yeah.
And, every time we put money there, we either have to take money away from another department or we have to get a reserve fund loan or, things like that. And that takes away money from the other necessary services that we need around here. But, I think overall for for the police in general, I think what people need to realize is, especially if you're pro police or, whatever police, I think the numbers are the numbers. And what the numbers show is that it costs close to 400 grand per officer. And every time I talk to people, well, they always talk about, well, everyone wants to defund, but I show them the numbers. Like, that's not the truth, though. Like, the truth of the matter is the police budget keeps growing, and it keeps growing, and it keeps growing, and it keeps growing. But what you see is the officer count is actually like even less. So you're actually paying for more with less officers. We're like at the same amount that we were over a decade ago, but we paid much less. It wasn't 3.6 billion like 15 years ago. It was like close to 2 billion, but we're paying 3.6 billion now for the same amount. And so it's actually getting more expensive. And then the more you want to get to this number that they keep throwing around is 10,000. I'm like, well, if you want to get to 10,000, you're going to need over $4 billion. What are you going to cut? You're going to close down all the animal shelters. You're going to stop repairing sidewalks, street lights. Your neighborhood's going to be dark forever. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going to have money for youth, for, aging, disability, like all these other departments or services that we provide if we keep doing it. And so for my role is I want to provide more of that transparency and accountability. And that's what we did with our helicopter audit. It costs over, like, even today's cost, it's over 50 million a year on helicopters. It's about $3,000 per flight hour. We found out, like, what are we paying for when these helicopters are in the air? And we found out that over, close to 60% of the time that they spend in the air is not spent on high priority. And you would think they are, because they are, expensive ass helicopters. And, we found out that it was, even the pollution, the noise pollution, all that was also very harmful for the community. So when it comes to police, my thing is I want to use data. I want to use audits to show, okay, if you love police or whatever, you don't, we know we're going to spend 3.6 billion. Let me tell you what that's getting us. So at least you can make an informed decision. And so that's how I view it. And I just know that, they are not getting defunded. If anything, every other department is pretty much getting or has been defunded.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're not defunding the police, you're actually defunding everything else because then how are you going to get the money? One of the other things that I noticed that you had put out earlier this month was that there was about $40 million in excess police pensions that were paid out.
Contributions? Yeah.
Yes.
Police pension contributions. Yeah. It's actually higher. It's like probably over 100 million now.
Yes, I saw that. So you had the post that I was at 40 million, and then you were like, actually, it's higher. It's around
every
100.
year. Yeah, every year it goes up and up and up. Exactly.
Yeah. And so I know that you mentioned that that is a bit of a complicated topic. Can you explain why? And also, why are we spending so much money on that?
I think pensions, when you talk about pensions, a lot of people are, they just think about it as like retirement. Like, oh yeah, pension's good, pension's great. But from a stepping back from a financial, like, accounting perspective, pensions are very expensive. That's why a lot of pensions in companies, they don't exist. Like, they only exist in government, and only a few governments actually have a pension still. LA being one of them. And the reason why is because pensions are very, very expensive on the taxpayers. Our city's general fund, about close to 20% of it is dedicated to pension costs every year. So you all pay for that. And basically what it is employees like myself, we contribute, let's say 11% of our own paycheck every 2 weeks to the pension pot, like to this pot. And then what happens is the city then takes every employee's salary, and then they contribute anywhere between 30% to like even close to 50% some years to the pension pot. So, if someone's salary is $300,000, the city is putting in, like, at the higher end on some years, 150 grand into that pot. And so you just see, like, it's very expensive. So just, what I'm saying now is, like, pensions are very expensive, but they're good for the employees. That's why a lot of people stay long. They're like lifers in government jobs, because the pension, once you retire, like, you're pretty much set for life. What happened with the police so they're on the higher end when the city contributes. And what happened is about 3 years ago, when the city negotiated the labor contract with the police union, which is, also another big reason why we ended up in a budget deficit, because their raises and their bonuses were huge.
Yeah.
But what was agreed upon at the time 3 years ago was the city was not going to contribute to the pension, to the pot, on those raises, because they were they were expensive. So they agreed. They said, okay, fine, we are not going to contribute on these like 3%, 4% raises every year for the next 3 years. So that way we could, save some money. What the city ended up doing is they contributed those raises to the pension pot anyways.
Mm.
So, let's say like an officer went from 100 grand to, I don't know, 120 grand or 110 grand, right? Over those 3 years. So that 10,000 difference, what would have happened is they wouldn't contribute like the half of it, like 50% of it, or $5,000 of that to the pension pot, or, say 40%, $4,000 to the pension pot. They wouldn't have done it. What they did was they did it anyways. And that's why we were saying, like, at the beginning, it was $40 million in excess. And every year, as they get a raise, that is why it grows to 80 million. Then it goes to over 100 million.
Right.
And because the city kept contributing to their pension fund, what ended up happening is the pension fund started doing really well, which is good for the employees. It was at 100% funded, meaning like you really can't contribute anymore, because it's already like you're set for the retirees. And what ended up also happening, not only the excess pension contributions, but because it was over 100%, there's a clause in their contract where if it ever reaches 100%, some of the members in a special tier 5, for the police officers, they will contribute less of their own paycheck to the pension pot. Remember, I was telling you in the beginning, like, we contribute a small amount.
Yep.
They're going to contribute 1% less, and what's going to happen is the city is going to cover that 1%. So the police officers contribute less, but the city pays more, which is another cost to you all. So that's the whole situation there, and that's just another example of like, hey y'all, like, there's a lot of money going there. Like, what are we paying for the police? And that's just another example of the things that we're trying to show the city.
Yeah, and one of the things that I heard you mention earlier is that a lot of this has to do with not only the mayor's proposed budget, but also the way that the city council ends up voting. And I think, I guess, in your opinion, could a lot of this be resolved in a way that actually reflects what the voters want more so? Because city council members are elected, right? Like, they're elected officials, but a lot of the times they run on progressive things, and then they end up getting on city council and they vote in very mysterious ways. Like, they end up going back on things. So would it help you do your job better and like continue to put out the information that actually shows people like how this money is being spent? Would it help you if city council was just voting in ways that would actually reflect the people's, wants and needs?
Yeah, my takeaway over the past 3.5 years, because when I first got in, and I would question why certain, even some of my allies, in office would do certain things. And what you realize when you get in city hall is it's all about compromise. You just need it, because especially if you're a council member, you cannot get any of your motions voted on or passed if you don't have the votes, or you don't have the camaraderie with the council president. And so that is why sometimes you'll see things happen and you'll question, like, why did they do that? Or why are they not going after this other member as hard? And so once you're in here, you get stumped. And then what ends up happening is when you run for like an election in 4 years, they'll be like, your detractors will say, well, you've been in the office, like, you haven't done anything. And it's like, well, I'm fighting for my district. I'm trying to do all these things, and no one wants to to do this. And so that's sort of what you hear a lot, especially like
Mm,
what's happening in these races. They're like, you've been in office for this year. Like, how come you haven't solved homelessness or solved this? It's
right.
like, well, we're trying to, but I need 8 votes. I need the mayor. I need all these people. So once you're in here, it's like, as looking on the, looking from the outside, like from the people, is do you want your council member, someone you support, to be in there, just be like, F everybody, I'm going to vote no on this all the time. And then, 4 years is done and you're like, oh, well, we didn't get much done, but I still support you. And then, eventually they term out. And
Right.
I think that's something that I think progressives and us needs to, probably give a little more, leeway to some of the members, because I think their heart is in the right place. But once you're in here, like City Hall definitely is set up in a way where, you know, if you go against somebody, they'll remember that, and they'll essentially make you like ineffective. And
Mm,
so I think that's sort of the tough thing. That's why for me, I've been being so transparent and communicative about what
mhm.
happens in government, like when they try to railroad me. Because I want you all to know why I can't do everything that you all want me to do. Yeah.
Right. And so you are running for reelection. So, we've already seen a lot of the work that you've done in your time in this position. What are some of the things that you are running on now? And like, what are some of the things that you would hope to do if you got reelected?
Yeah, we've done so much since being in office. We made so many, like I said, data transparency websites. We're very active on social media. Like, we respond to comments when we have time. Um, we're doing audits that people wanted us to do. Like the LAPD helicopter was an audit that people wanted us to do when we first ran.
Yeah.
People wanted us to audit homelessness spending, so we did that too.
Mhm.
So we're very like, we democratize our office as best as we can to what you all want. I would say, for our second term, we want to change the way the city handles its finances and its budget on a more systemic level. And the way we're doing that right now is through charter reform. So a lot of the recommendations that we've been saying about the city's finances or making it, better, the city's actually listening to us now. When we said that, hey, we need a 2-year budget, they're moving towards a 2-year budget. When we said the city needs a chief financial officer, they're moving towards its chief financial officer. When we said the city needs to create a capital, infrastructure improvement plan, a CIP, they're moving that now, because everyone knows our infrastructure in the city is totally whack. When we said that we need to be more honest about our liabilities and our budget, the city started budgeting more honestly, especially about all the lawsuits and the liabilities, because the city would budget very low every year. They would only budget 87 million, but we'd be spending like 300 million a year. And so it was just very disruptive when we overspent the budget. So my focus for my next term is to get the city to really truly focus on the way they finance, the way they budget, so that in turn, the way we spend our money can result in actual services and better resources for you all. Because I truly believe that everything revolves around money and budget. If you want something to change in the city, you could pass a good policy or a good law, but if you don't have the money behind it, then it's whack, right? You could be like, social housing is a human right, and we're gonna, every new building is gonna be built, and then you see that they only get a budget of $1 million a year. You're like, wait a second, like that's only like
Yeah,
2 units.
it's not
So
happening.
that's why I think it's so important. Like, the money is there, right?
Mhm.
And so for me, that's the perspective that I've grown. I want the city to budget and finance more honestly, be more upfront, and I think for them, they're realizing that now, because they're always trying to railroad me on what I could say or not say. But I'm accountable to you all. They can't tell me what to do.
Yes, definitely. In these last couple minutes that I have you, you are infamously known for your corgi branding, the
Wish I
marketing.
had
I
a
know. I'm like, do you have the corgi?
corgi hat, but
Yes. So just quickly, tell us why the corgi
great.
and corgi going to come back in term 2 if you get it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's actually a good reason why we include them in everything. Another name for the city controller is the city's watchdog. And
Yeah.
so we use it not only to get attention to, very boring topics sometimes like numbers and accounting, but
Right.
it's the watchdog, right? And so they are the watchdog of City Hall, although, they're cute and fluffy. But that's the connection. And for, of course, we'll as long as they're here, they're kicking, they'll always be here.
Yes, definitely. And one of the things that I know you for as well is your advocacy for a lot of the shelters across the city. Not a lot of money is going to the shelters. I do also a lot of work with local rescues, and they are constantly looking for funding, looking for money because there's a lot of overcrowding. There's not enough space. There's not enough funding to keep the animals safe. Obviously, kill shelters have had to euthanize a lot of the pets or a lot of the animals because there's not enough space, and so they have to, make space, which is an incredibly unfortunate, thing that we have to do in the city. So your advocacy there is really important. And just to close this out, what would you hope to see the city do when it comes to the animal shelters in the city?
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned a couple minutes ago, this is an example where if you don't have enough money or budget, but you have laws, right? Because there are laws where it's like you can't breed because there's a
Right.
moratorium, or you have to have a license, and but there's no like money out there to enforce things, right?
Right.
Or to help the shelters. And what I would like to see is more money, more funding towards, and we've done it. We've done it in office. Is push for more spay and neuter. I think that's
Mm.
like a big one. More spay and neuter. Obviously, more staff to help with, especially to help at the shelters, because at times they could get overcrowded, and there needs to be more ways to ensure they have like enrichment. They can go out and get walked, especially the dogs. There's enough volunteers. The city used to actually pay for volunteers to be as needed staff. And, it wasn't a lot of money, but it would pay like these volunteers who love doing the job, and it helped them, get
Mhm.
the dogs out, clean the kennels, you know, the small animals, the cats. And I think that, the city stopped doing that recently. And
Mhm.
so, my overall take on the city's views on animal welfare and animal services is that it's not good. Like they don't value it. And when I use the word value, I don't mean it in the like emotional or philosophical way. I mean it from a money standpoint, because I see how
Right.
much money they get, and it's like 0%, close to
Yes.
1% of the budget. And if you did value animal welfare, you would put more towards it. So, for us though, in our office, we're auditing animal services right now, the department, mainly as it relates to the animal shelters and their capacity. So we'll be releasing those results, and hopefully we could get some ways to help that department get more revenue, and also, streamline their processes so that way it's more organized and things like that.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. It very clearly shows a lot of the charts that you put out and a lot of the information that's on your website. It clearly shows that, if you're not funding libraries, if you're not funding animal shelters, if you're not funding, a lot of the services that would really help to make the city a lot more of like uh great for lack of a better term, then you're actually not interested in making sure that the city functions in a way that actually serves the people, right? And so I really have appreciated all of the work that you've put out. Like you said, the corgi branding is really working because it got me paying attention. And I was like, oh shit, we're spending so much money on policing. This is nuts. So I really have appreciated the work that you've done in the position as you have held it. And best of luck to you in this campaign.
Thank you, Leanna. Appreciate y'all.
Eunisses, welcome.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thanks for being here. So, Eunisses is currently a council member who is running for re-election in District 1, correct?
Yes.
Yes. So I wanted to have Eunisses on because, of course, we're doing our California politics series. First, let's get into it. So you are being challenged by four other people who don't have as progressive of a platform as you do. So tell us a little bit about what your progressive policies actually are as somebody who's wanting to get reelected.
Yes, thank you for that question. Also, for me, I my whole career has always been to advocate for justice and for our most vulnerable communities, our seniors, our young people, our working families. And that often means that I'm most of the time, 10 out of 10 times, not advocating for the interests that have made many corporations and many people rich. And so I'm talking about capping rents for rent stabilized units. We did that last year at 4%. That hadn't been done in 40 years. And so that's one thing that we're pushing forward. And I'm sorry, you're gonna hear all my critters. That's just, they help me move through. But what I have been pushing are care first models. And what does that mean? What does that mean? That means we address crises with care, with services, instead of meeting it with criminalization at the jump. And for me, that's important because the criminalization of our communities, the carceral system is so harmful, but also very expensive. So for me, moving forward, care first policies are important. I think that's what differentiates me from the other people running against me is that they want to throw the hammer down on people, throw them away, disappear them, and erase them. And that's not me. I value human dignity, human life, and that sometimes means that the solution takes a little bit longer, but it's more fiscally responsible and more long term and more impactful.
Yeah, definitely. And we've seen how the ICE raids have really been so problematic in California and across the nation. And obviously Los Angeles was one of the first to get hit really hard with the ICE raids. I remember you granted me an interview about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago now. Or actually, yeah, it was a year and a half ago, where I was looking for somebody on the council to talk to me about getting the sanctuary city law passed in Los Angeles just prior to Trump getting the nomination, and he ended up winning, obviously. And we knew that he was running on mass deportations. So tell me a little bit about some of the work that you've been doing as a council member to continue to protect people across Los Angeles, but specifically in your district.
Yes, so I represent, thank you for that question. It's really important. And we're about a year now into the raids that have been happening. One of the first raids that took place in the city of LA was at the Day Labor Center in Cypress Park, which is where I represent. I have two day labor centers, one in Westlake at the Home Depot there, and one in Cypress Park at that Home Depot. And to see that happening, I still remember because it shook me. We were at the Van Nuys City Hall conducting council as normal, and we started getting these videos and pictures of this raid taking place. And after that, it was an onslaught. And the first 3 weeks of these raids, literally the city was teetering on martial law. I was at Dodger Stadium at one point when the federal agents were staging to do raids. That was a trap for the community to try to create a situation of violence to bring out the National Guard to Dodger Stadium, an iconic location in the city. And so that's just what was happening in the beginning, right? Of middle of last year. And for me, the moment that we didn't, like you said, we talked about the sanctuary city ordinance before he got sworn in, and that's when we started moving on this. The city of LA was a city of sanctuary, not a sanctuary city. So we had to fight to push that legislation forward and to push it and adopt it before he got sworn in. So on a lawmaking level, that's one thing that I heavily pushed for and led on. But more on a micro level in my district, the families that have been impacted, people that have been kidnapped by the federal government off our streets, breadwinners taken from our communities, people too scared to go to work and go to school. I represent MacArthur Park, Pico Union, Westlake, some of the densest neighborhoods, highest immigrant communities there in regards to population. So what what I've had to do is prevent families from falling into the eviction to homelessness pipeline. So filling the gaps after these raids, putting $500,000 in rental assistance, $500,000 in food access, $500,000 to support our small businesses impacted by the raids, which they said was worse than COVID-19. And for me, that is a part of this job is our communities pay a lot of taxes. And if I could be the one to help bring in the resources and be that conduit and fill those gaps, that's what I focused on. And the last piece that I will uplift in this is that my team and I really set the standard for what it looked like for a council district to respond. We have trained hundreds and hundreds of community members in our district on how to respond to federal immigration raids that are happening so that they can document what's happening, get the info, and connect those people with the resources that we have. It's called our Community Defense Network. We're not rebuilding what community is doing. We're just bringing in the city resources to help enhance it. And we also do district-wide and neighborhood text messages, letting people know when we have a verified raid, hey, this is happening near you. These are your rights. Be careful. And that's not putting a wall between us and the federal government, but it prevents the city from using its resources, its staff time, its facilities into enabling federal immigration enforcement, and opens the door for more city resources to get to our community, which as a council member, I feel like that's my job, is to open the door to our communities.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, obviously, as a part of, the ICE raids happening, LAPD ended up getting, called out to the detention centers where people were protesting, and it got national attention. It wasn't just a local issue anymore because the LAPD was extremely brutal to both protesters and press. I obviously covered it, but so did a multitude of national media publications. And a woman, a journalist from Australia, was shot by the LAPD with a rubber bullet as she was trying to basically go live and report on the situation. And there was a bit of controversy around the city council's decision to pass the overtime for the LAPD after they brutalized all the protesters and the press. So can you tell me a little bit about how you were kind of handling that situation and why you chose to vote the way that you did, and tell us how you vote?
Yes. Well, for me, when it comes to making any type of money move, if this is giving more money to the carceral system, to law enforcement responses, I, usually vote no, because I don't want to give more money and more power to the systems that harm us. And that's why I have voted no previously on city budgets, the LAPD contract, LAPD overtime. I voted no on this as well. Because of the amount of money that it costs us for them to be the frontline responders on things perhaps that they shouldn't be on the front lines of, or that they need better policies. During the protests, we saw that they were on horses with batons, stomping people, hitting them, like things that we saw in the Jim Crow era. We saw them using less than lethals on people, on reporters. Though you can't deny the videos and the pictures there. And so for me, yes, I'm gonna vote no against that money. But also, there was a moment where the city attorney submitted a motion to the court on a case around, using less than lethal ammunition and weapons against reporters. And when I found out that she did that, for me, I was like, how are we trying to fight authoritarianism and taking authoritarian tactics and using them as a city? So I put in a motion asking the city attorney to retract that motion, so that we are not moving forward the ideology that it is okay to shoot people protesting, that it's okay to shoot our media and our press, because it's not. And unanimously the council supported that, and so the city attorney retracted that motion. And during these federal immigration raids, I've submitted 22 motions trying to get the city council, the LAPD, to be more accountable, for it not to look like they are enabling federal immigration enforcement, for them not to be out there brutalizing people. So I've submitted 22 motions to hold LAPD accountable during these federal immigration raids, around the protesting, their overuse of force, getting them to implement a unmasking policy, an identification policy for when dealing with federal agents. We're still waiting for outcomes on that. And that is because, and I want to highlight this, in this city of LA, the Constitution of the city doesn't give council members the authority to hold LAPD accountable when it comes to the drafting and implementation of policies. So I can draft all these policies I want to hold LAPD accountable for them to change the way they do their job or for them to implement better policies, and they don't have to adopt anything. And that's why charter reform that's happening right now is so important, because there's a recommendation in the charter reform report that will allow the city council authority to make sure that LAPD and the Board of Police Commissioners implement policies that we send their way, which I don't think anybody really saw it as an issue until we couldn't get them to stop, looking like they're in federal immigration enforcement last year. So a lot to do. They take a lot of money. They cost us a lot of money, and that's why I don't vote to give them more money.
Yeah. And thank you for that vote. I was one of the journalists that filed that injunction that the city attorney, as you mentioned, tried to get lifted. And I recently interviewed Marissa Roy, who is running for that seat and is also endorsed by a lot of the same organizations that are endorsing you. And so I was really happy to see that you were not a part of voting for the overtime pay, because it's super important that people understand they violated people's First Amendment right. The freedom of the press is one of the most important things that we have in a democracy. And if a city attorney is trying to get something like protections for the press lifted, it just makes you wonder what side you're on. So I really appreciated that. Now there is, again, a little bit of controversy as well, because one of the council members that you have been a colleague with did end up voting for the overtime and is now running for mayor. But you have actually endorsed Bass. So tell me a little bit about the thinking there, and how do you think that the mayoral position can co-work with the city council, because city council actually has a little bit more power than the mayor does. And that's what makes the city council seats in Los Angeles so important. So can you tell me a little bit about the strategy behind that?
Yes. So for me, I work with everyone. It's just not on everything. And I really have had to learn that in order to get things passed, I need a majority. And that doesn't mean that how do I say this? That doesn't mean that I don't follow my values. That just means I learn how to build relationships with my colleagues to have them hear me and understand why I'm moving an issue. And I believe that moving with the people is the right way to move, especially with community. And so that's how I roll always, building coalitions, building tables. And when I thought about public safety, which is one of my top priorities, I didn't see a lot of difference in the candidates, in the positions around public safety. I want to work with someone that's going to really help implement the alternatives to crisis response, the alternatives to incarceration. And, I've been working with the mayor on our unarmed crisis response teams, on building up a Department of Community Safety, on addressing some of the issues in MacArthur Park. And I know that there's someone that I can work with there. Obviously, I don't agree with everything, but I believe, there's space to move, and there's a lot of work to do. So that's what I'm trying to focus on.
Yeah.
And the immigration rates, she showed up to MacArthur Park. She was present, and I think that's important. And during that time, I was also able to lean on her for support for our district.
Thanks for explaining that. So you mentioned just briefly crisis response. Now, I would love for you to talk about this a little bit more, because one of the things that progressives love is an alternative to police response to things that police don't really need to be showing up to, right? And it causes friction between communities and policing, and it continues to cause this distrust between the police and the people. And so one of the things that progressives love to see is an alternative. So can you talk to us a little bit about that alternative that you have presented and that you're trying to get passed?
Yes, so we have a program that my colleagues just voted to make permanent 2 months ago, which is called our Unarmed Crisis Response System. These are teams made up of clinicians, former paramedics, social workers, doctors, peer navigators that respond to calls that come into 911 and it's a list of about 28 calls. Some of them are around suicidal ideation, loitering, people having mental health crises, behavioral health crises, and they are trained in how to respond to these things. I've met workers who have prevented people from taking their own life because of the work that they've done and responded to. When they respond to a call, it's $35. If LAPD responds to the same call, it's $85. And they've responded to over 20,000 calls so far in the last year and a half. And less than 4% have they needed LAPD backup. So if they need it, they can get it. But most of the calls, they don't need it. And now the fire department is also starting to route calls to them. And what this does is that it brings more hands and teams to the public safety ecosystem so that our most precious and most expensive resources, which are police and fire, can focus on more serious issues that require that level of response. You know, I had Takar Smith, who was killed in my district. My first year, second month in office. And he was having a mental health crisis. And instead of getting the help, LAPD killed him in his kitchen. And so that for me was, you know, I was doing alternate types of crisis response work before I got into this position. But losing Takar Smith in Westlake really put a fire under us in getting this established. And now we're in the point where it's permanent and we're going to be at full citywide capacity by the Olympics. So we're saving lives, we're saving money. And I will say that I've been doing this criminal justice reform work, alternate types of crisis response, and alternatives to incarceration work for over a decade. And if you would have talked about a program like this existing in the city 10 years ago, you would have been laughed out of here, because who would ever say that we would be able to draw away calls away from the LAPD? And now we're about to be citywide. So I just want to name that as like, it's taken a long time to get here, both outside and inside, but we're here and so close to getting a citywide system and response that I'm incredibly proud of. I co-chair that ad hoc committee that has gotten us here, and I can't wait for it to be citywide. And we have, you know, right now, just the last thing on this that I'm super excited about is we have a fire station, an old fire station that we're working with our state legislators to get money to refurbish. And it would be like the first station for, instead of for fire, for unarmed crisis response teams to deploy from. And it's in Koreatown, one of our densest neighborhoods. So I'm excited to be able to bring that forward as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I really, really love to see a program like that continue, especially when we have, speaking of the mayor's race, we have a Republican that is running on shipping off the homeless to a total, like into the desert outside of the city, into what I imagine could only be a concentration camp of sorts. And it has been calling, you know, the homeless community in Los Angeles zombies, and like just really dehumanizing rhetoric. And so I guess before you go, in the event that Spencer Pratt wins in November, what do you want to do as a city council member, hoping that you are actually elected or reelected? What are you hoping the city council can do together to try and prevent some of this like really dehumanizing stuff that we're hearing from him?
Yes, well, with the power of God in the universe, we get Marissa Roy elected as our city attorney, Estuardo Mazariegos, Council District 9, Faiza Malek representing Council District 11. I get in my seat, Hugo stays in his seat, because we are a strong council system, and we are on the precipice of getting some members that are going to take us to the next level, where regardless of who the mayor is, we're going to build the power to veto what they put forward, to put things forward that we can then rebut. And so that's what gives me hope, that we're bringing in good people to help us in that fight. And if we have a terrible mayor, and even if we had the composition that we do now on the council, I believe that there's values there, and how would I say this? A lot of the same vision that we would push back against a terrible mayor. So I have hope. I know that people are going to do the right thing. When you look at Los Angeles compared to the state, and you compare ballot measures, good ballot measures usually win in LA and fail in other parts of the state. So I'm hoping in this time, we also show that we are the progressive city, not faux progressive, not moderate Democrats, but that we are, we want to see our city progress forward and be, quote unquote, that city, world-class city that everybody talks about, but we're not throwing people away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Eliana. Thank you for having me, for your patience with me, and for allowing me to share some of the work that we've been doing on your platform.
Of course. And best of luck on your campaign.
Thank you.